Hi there, future Ps. This is Wasim Asgar. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the US and Canada. In this video, you will see me answering a question that I received from one of my students during P-Power live training. This question relates to medium transmission line model. Transmission lines belong to section number 4 of the P-Power exam specification. They're a very important topic. If you're coming from FE Electrical and Computer Exam Prep, then you have already seen lossless transmission lines under electromagnetics. For the P-Power exam preparation, things obviously are a little bit more challenging. We deal with short, medium, and long transmission line models, and they progressively become a little bit more difficult. So without further ado, let us dive into the content. Medium transmission line model. Very quickly before we dive into this question, what is the distance range, top of your head, don't look at the reference handbook, for medium transmission lines? Anyone? 50 to 100 watt. 50 to 100 mile. Is that correct? Are you guys sure? Now let's take a look at the reference handbook. It is actually 50 to 150. Okay? Right or wrong, guys? Right or wrong? Now, why did I test you on this? And this was a rapid fire round, right? Because I don't want you to do this. On the exam, why would you take a risk with something so critical to a question? Because if you are working with this number and the distance is 125, guess what? You are going to classify this as a long transmission line. And do you think you will be able to calculate the parameters A, B, C, and D correctly? No. Okay. So remember, P-Power exam is not a race against time. Have you looked at the differences in physique of a marathon runner as compared to a sprinter? What is the main difference? It's like Usain Bolt and Mo Farah, right? Mo Farah, I think, is the most decorated Olympian when it comes to marathon running. Skinny, right? Very skinny. They have the heart of a lion in terms of the cardiovascular strength, but they're very skinny. And Usain Bolt, muscular. Why? Because you need explosive strength when you're running 100 meter, 200 meter, and maybe up to 400 meter. But that muscle mass will be counterproductive when you're trying to run a marathon. Okay? So we need to recognize that the first instinctive approach and jumping on the prey is counterproductive when we are dealing with P-Power. That helps in FE electrical, but it is counterproductive. And you can very well walk out of the exam thinking back about this question, having used 125 for long transmission line model, and maybe solved the question and would have even ended up as option D, which would have been correct. Very likely. Okay. But guess what? All of that effort would have been wasted, useless. So when we are dealing with concepts which are very closely related, utilize everything that is at your disposal. As soon as you start transitioning to section number 4 of the P-Power exam, make sure that your reference handbook is always displaying everything to its fullest potential for the knowledge area that you're being tested on the exam. I know it requires a little bit of break in your focus, flow, and momentum, but it is super important. I cannot overemphasize this. This would categorize as a silly mistake. And my point was not to embarrass you guys or to lead you or prime you into making this mistake. But as you can see, majority of you ended up using 100. Okay. Anyways, so let's get back to the question that the student is asking. Please confirm if the below is correct. So circle this, right? Because my understanding is that we should convert the rectangular numbers to polar numbers when we want to multiply, otherwise it gives a different result. Right off the bat, this is a wrong statement. You can go ahead and solve complex numbers, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, whatever you want to do with them, square root, by using either rectangular form or polar form. It is true that when it comes to multiplication and division, polar is easier. Okay. It is true that when it comes to addition and subtraction, rectangular is easier. But it doesn't mean that only one of them is going to give you the right answer. Does it make sense? And also, if we step a little bit back, so we started out with the distance for the transmission line, medium transmission line model. If we compare it to the very basic model which we have in the form of short transmission line, what is the key difference? Can somebody tell me? Let me actually just draw the short transmission line. And this is sort of like a Mickey Mouse diagram, right? You have better version of this diagram in the lecture notes, in the reference handbook. Okay, so this is my short transmission line model. And the long transmission line model, when we look at it from the big picture view of things, can be represented as a pi or a t. In fact, in the on-demand course, I have actually derived from scratch equations, A, B, C, D parameters for both the pi model as well as the t model. Okay. Now, the thing that we need to remember, the one that is given in the reference handbook is actually pi. So let's just focus on pi, is that the key difference, in addition to the line, the difference in the length, right, is the fact that from the standpoint of your sending end current, can you see that the sending end current is not equal to the receiving end current? And I'm going to mention this in our overview as well. Whereas over here, sending end current is equal to receiving end current. For the medium, the pi model, why is that not the case? Very simple. Because I have this current branching out. Can you see this, guys? Okay. So in addition to knowing the formulas, knowing the equations, having the diagram in front of you, just make sure that you also understand these concepts at a very, very fundamental level. This also has mathematical implications. And this IS is equal to IR is what makes A is equal to D is equal to 1 for short transmission line. Can you guys see that on the reference handbook? Correct? And that's why for the short transmission line in the voltage regulation formula, A is always equal to 1, right? So we can actually just keep it Vs minus VR divided by VR. Okay? So we need to look into these concepts with a little bit more depth. And when you do a 360-degree review of these concepts, which I've attempted to do with you guys in the on-demand, in the live training, homework assignments, quizzes, mini exams, study guide problem sets, you don't have anything to worry about. Okay? So my response to the student was that you can approach this problem in so many different ways, right? So This takes purely mathematical form now. We have the capital Y, which is the total admittance, total impedance. When I multiply these guys out, you can multiply them by converting them into the polar forms, right? Multiply them out. So the magnitude of Y, this is the magnitude of Y, this is the magnitude of Z. And when we are multiplying two polar complex numbers together, their phase angles simply add up. Okay. So, there are multiple ways to skin a cat. Make sense? And if you are punching these numbers properly into the calculator, you don't have to even worry about it. It is just math 101. Okay? Make sense? So please go through the content in the on-demand course, lectures, quizzes, pay attention. So it's a good question that the student asked, but I think it's a very fundamental question and it's more mathematical in nature. But the fact of the matter is when we're dealing with transmission line models, a lot of issues that we run into are mathematical in nature, especially when we deal with the long transmission line model. Go through the live training, understand the differences. One of the best ways to learn transmission line models, as I've attempted to explain you guys in the live training as well, is by comparison. So we start out with the short transmission line model, which just has the series components R and X, and then we throw in our shunt capacitances in the pi model or the T model. The reference handbook uses the pi model, so we're going to stick with that. In the course, I've derived equations for the T model as well. And then you move on to long transmission line where the length is incorporated as part of the ABCD parameters. And we introduce something called as hyperbolic trigonometric functions. So it becomes progressively more difficult. Okay. So you have access to content. Please make sure you utilize it and you should be all set. And tons of practice problems as well in the form of quizzes, in the form of mini exams, in the form of homework assignments, study guide, and so on. If you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing. On a weekly basis, I'm creating content for FE electrical and PE power exam preparation. I also discuss topics related to electrical engineering with a focus on power systems engineering. If you'd like to learn more about my FE electrical and PE power exam preparation programs, please visit my website, StudyforFE.com.